It's time for another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth, and as always, joining me today is your other host, Paul Hayes. In this episode, we're going to continue talking about efficiency in your herd and increasing profit and income. Again, our guest is going to be Dr. Cleere. Let's get this episode started. Welcome to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast,
bringing you the innovative new ways of the cattle industry.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth and Paul Hayes. Together, we're going to be interviewing leaders within the cattle industry.
Here on this podcast, our focus is honoring God and innovating the cattle industry. Get ready to listen, learn, and laugh as we help innovate the cattle industry.
Let's get innovating.
EP Cattle Company. Owned by Eddie Wilson, EP Cattle Company is home of Sir Rouse Handshake. Rouse Handshake is a sound-structured, heavy-muscle bull that is really bold-ribbed. So it comes with no surprise that he is a Fort Worth and San Antonio Junior Show Division Champion and Rio Grande Valley Open Show Division Champion. He is a grandson of BRC Noble and JDH Shank Manso, and is also a great-grandson of Mr. H. Elijah Manso. You can contact Eddie Wilson or Nicole Wilson on Facebook at EP Cattle Company. So remember, if you're looking for some well-performing, registered Brahman genetics, contact Eddie Wilson on Facebook.
All right, Dr. Cleere, we're happy to have you back. We are excited. Our last episode was great, and I'm sure this one will be too. We're going to continue talking about making our herds efficient and increasing income. And so the first thing we want to talk about is managing input costs. We talked about how to decrease input costs, but we kind of want to talk about how to manage it in different ways, where maybe we may not be decreasing it, but we can manage it in different ways. So when selecting cattle, how do you decide if it's worth the investment to purchase higher quality genetics or not? Because sometimes, you may have a great opportunity, but you don't know if that's the right investment for that time.
Right. Yeah, I think it and again, Baxter, you're talking about more on the commercial side of the business. Is that what you're thinking? Commercial cow-calf?
Commercial or purebred, whichever is, or even feedlot, whichever you want to. We can go all three, two, or one, whichever you want.
Yeah, I think you have to really look at, what, on the purebred side of things, if I'm going to invest, $20,000-$30,000 on this particular cow, you have to, when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about, okay, what is my potential opportunity to sell genetics out of that animal? Whether it be, okay, can I be selling some embryos out of that cow? How can I recover that investment in there? And so, again, that return on investment is the key thing with that on the purebred and seed stock side of things. If I spend $500,000 on a cow, can I produce enough genetics either directly, meaning I selling offspring, whether it be embryos or calves, or will that animal that I can use to improve my herd with that? And I think that's ultimately the question you have to ask. Same thing on the commercial side of things. Okay, if I'm buying, looking to invest in a bull, all right, to put on my set of commercial cows. Right now, everybody's looking for still that $2,500 or $3,000 bull to buy to put on a set of commercial cows. Well, that bull is pretty much almost non-existent unless it's a baby calf, because our bulls that go to the packing plant right now, they're bringing $3,000 to $4,000 right now just to go into beef. And so that's kind of non-existent. But, so then the next question is, okay, so if I'm paying $5,000 for this bull, or should I bump it up a notch and spend another 1,000 or 6,000 or 7,000? Well, then I've got to factor in, okay, well, what does that cost me per calf? Okay, and I actually have a bull calculator that I developed years and years ago that looks at the kind of the cost per calf for that bull. But then what happens is if I buy that better bull, and I can increase my pounds of weaning by 20 pounds per calf. Okay, and if I do that, and that bull sires 20 calves a year, that's another 400 pounds that we're putting on that calf. That bull can contribute to the operation. In today's market, that's roughly about $1,200 there. That bull adds to that calf crop, and so then if I multiply that over his lifetime in the herd, which is maybe 5 years, I mean, you're talking at about $6,000. So I invested an additional 1,000 to get a little better bull to get me a little more pounds, and my return was an additional 6,000. So that's a pretty good investment in the operation. So I think anytime when you invest in those genetics, you've got to look at it from that particular perspective. The other thing is you have to look at it kind of the long term too. Right now, it doesn't matter. As long as that calf's got 4 legs and looks like it's going to stay breathing, it's going to bring good money now. Corriente cross, it is. But we all know that whenever we go down in the cattle cycle and the numbers are high again and they can pick and choose more, the buyers, kind of the balls in the buyer's court, those kind of cattle are going to get heavily discounted. Now, I've got some friends, and they're in Madison County that 5 years ago they were buying all the Corriente cows they could find and putting beef bulls on them, and they're making a mint right now because they paid about $200 a head for those cows, $200 to $300. So that's again. That was they bought them in that down. When the price was depressed in that market, and now those little old cows, they're going to wean that big old calf, but they probably look like the smart ones. Okay, now again, from an overall beef industry perspective, do I recommend that? No, because I think we have to be quality driven in our industry. But you can't argue with somebody that put that little investment, and now they're looking like the smart ones right now. Now, again, when you pick and choose, the buyers can, those Corriente crosses are going to start getting discounted pretty heavily again.
Right, that's true, but that was a good investment for the time. That's pretty neat that you made a bull calculator also. That's neat as well. Is that just the formula you have written down, or is it digital?
Yeah, it's an Excel spreadsheet that I put together that, you can plug in, different EPDs and, as you increase your weight. And then also the other factor that I didn't throw into that 20, I mentioned 20 pounds, but if I buy a better bull, I'm probably going to produce, maybe heavier muscle, stouter made calves that are also, hopefully going to bring a few pennies more per pound. So, you start doing the math, and you're taking 5 cents more in that bull. If he produces 20 calves at 500 pounds a calf, you're looking at 10,000 more pounds, times 5 cents a pound. It begins to add up quite a bit with that.
Top Notch Cattle Company, selling semen on high-quality registered red and gray Brahman cattle that are reproductively efficient, structurally sound, big-ribbed, heavy-muscled, and deep-bodied. Contact me at 903-649-9155. Again, that's 903-649-9155. Or email me at bbwtopnotchcattle@gmail.com.
Yes, sir. That it definitely just like gas pump adds up. But so starting in the register Brahmins kind of not having as much to be able to start in that, but still wanting to start. I've experienced, having to find the best ways to get quality genetics without breaking the bank. And so my question for you is what is the best way to get quality genetics without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I have tried to do is try to find, buy the best animal I can, quality genetic wise, and then hopefully hang my hat on that animal, and then I can propagate that animal through in vitro fertilization. Um, that's changed the game quite a bit, especially if you're trying to replace, build your herd with females, reverse sorted semen. We can do that with that. The other thing with that, the in vitro fertilization is that, a lot of times, especially in well, many of the breeds now, AI semen, a lot of it's, these better bulls that are kind of the home runs, their semen's bringing a lot of money. All right. And so it's hard to flush just one cow to that when you're spending $1,200 to $2,000 a straw. But if I could set up 3 cows through an IVF, fertilize 3 cows, now I'm looking at $400 per, per per cycle, IVF cycle. So it brings the cost down with that. So I think, investing in some genetics like that versus trying to, okay, I bought a set of cows that are average at best. I'm going to try to, over years, make them better. In today's time, that's hard to do, I think, especially when we have the reproductive technologies that we have.
I absolutely think using IVF, that's something I'm planning to do with my herd is, you know, especially now that we have IVF, I think quality over quantity is very important because if you get that one high quality cow that you're able to IVF and aspirate her, then you're able to multiply those genetics and take quality to quantity. And I
Absolutely.
believe it's easier to go from quality to quantity than quantity to quality.
Yep. Absolutely.
You kind of touched on what I was going to ask you next, but there are some situations that IVF may not be the wisest decision for that ranch. So, how can a producer decide if it's wise to invest in the reproductive programs like ET and IVF?
Yeah, I think you again, it comes back down to I've talked a lot about uh, what the cost versus the benefit is. Okay, if you're in the let's just say the Brahmin business, and you're raising Brahmin females, and you say, okay, I'm gonna go buy the best cow I can afford, and I spend $20,000 on that cow. And so I've got my genetic investment in that cow. And I figured out if I can produce in her lifetime, if I can produce 20 calves out of her, and it may be more, I've got $1,000 a calf in genetics invested from that cow. And I'm just keeping it simple math, Aggie math, if you want to make fun of the Aggies. But so I've got $1,000 in genetic investment there because that cow cost me $20,000. And then I got to figure out, well, what it cost me to produce that embryo. Okay. And so if she's only given, 6 embryos per cycle, I may have 500 to $800 an embryo tied up in that, depending on what my semen is. But let's just say it's $500 an embryo to produce that embryo. Well, we know that we're not going to be 100%, Baxter. All right. So if I just base my cost on a 50% success rate, I've got $1,000 in embryo cost. So now we're up to 1,000 genetics, 1,000 in embryo. But then we also have to factor in, okay, well, what does it cost me to raise that calf when I put that embryo in there as well? And if it's costing me, if I'm paying, it's costing me $1,500. So right now I've got, just to get that calf to weaning, I got $3,500 tied up in it, Paul. And so, and I'm selling them for $4,000. Okay. Is it worth me going through that, or am I better off, just trying to, do it from a natural standpoint, AI? So I think that's what you have to, look at. Well, what's my cost of production per calf? What is my expected return out of that calf? And that's what you have to figure out.
I agree, and IVF ET, it can be pretty crazy in terms of it's now some companies do it different with their pricing, but when some of those, sometimes you'll have some that will charge you for this and then charge you for that, and you just have to find. It's like a maze trying to figure out what your expected price would be, and then it's even harder because you don't know exactly how many embryos that cow will produce.
Right.
Or you don't even know how many will take. I mean, there's sometimes people won't have barely any take, and then sometimes they'll barely have any miss. So it's
embryo work. It can be a humbling experience. If you start off and you're like, man, this cow produced 20 embryos, and we're at 70%. Well, next year you're probably gonna have a cow that produces one, and you'll be at about a 40% conception rate. So it's all works on the averages, it seems like. So I always, tell producers, and for me personally, I err on more of a conservative side when I'm thinking about what my expectations are.
absolutely. Go ahead.
That's great. And then moving on from that, we're going to talk about our increasing income next. So we've talked about how to reduce our inputs. So now with our income, do you see any opportunities, or what are the opportunities that you see producers pass up to increase their income?
Yeah, good question, Paul. I mean, one of the things that I already mentioned is growth implants. All right. That's a low input strategy that can provide good returns. Another one is, deworming those calves and cows in the spring, if there is parasite load. We found that deworming the calves increases the pounds of weaning weight on those calves. So just a little bit of investment, we can provide a pretty big return. Fly control, external parasite control. That's another one. That's a low investment strategy. But we found in some East Texas herds on some trials years ago that you returned an additional 15 to 20 pounds of additional weaning weight by just controlling flies on these cows. So I think that's a critical thing. Investing in herd health as well. And I think oftentimes we think of herd health as a cost, and it is a cost. It definitely is. But also you have to figure out, well, what's my risk analysis? Okay. And look at that cost benefit ratio there. Right now with calves bringing what they are, through implementing that herd health program and making sure I'm not going to have any reproductive diseases in there that decreases my percent calf crop, it pays off big dividends now. And so that additional $8 to $10 per cow that you're investing seems cheap when you're thinking about, well, I can get one extra calf on the ground, or prevent those losses. So those are things. Bull fertility, that's another huge one that I see ranchers that, when they, they don't, we recommend before you turn the bulls out, preferably probably 30 days prior. That way that if you do have a bull that is bad, you can get another bull in time. But do a breeding soundness exam and fertility exam at least 30 days out before those bulls go out, or at least once a year if you keep the bull out year round, to make sure that bull is doing its job. And you say, man, that's another, let's just say it's $100 to get that bull fertility tested. Well, I mean, how many open cows does it take to pay for that $100? So those are things that you really, again, we can't cut. We're in a time, and we always had been. I mean, the most productive producers minimize costs, but spend that money in the right places. But those are things that are important. And, we talked about a lot on. I'm a beef cattle specialist, and so I think about the cattle side, the live animal, but things like pasture management as well. As ranchers, we're first and foremost grass farmers. We got to grow the forage from them. Sounds better to say I'm a rancher versus a grass farmer. Okay. But we think about managing those forages through either herbicide use to kill the weeds and invasive brush species. Because if we're not growing weeds, we're growing more grass. So low investment opportunities like that are important. So there's a lot of things that we can do that are little input that can have huge impacts, especially when calf prices are really high.
Hi guys, I'm your co-host, Paul Hayes, and I'd like to tell you all about my family business that has been going on for over 50 years now, and that is raising quality registered Brahman cattle. Our ranch is called Flat Rock Brahmins, and we have locations in Glen Rose and LaGrange, Texas. And we are here for all of your cattle needs. Whether it's needing show cattle, replacement females, or even a new herd sire, we would be happy to earn your business and watch our genetics excel in your herd. You can contact me by email at paulhayesv@icloud.com or my dad, who helps manage the ranch, at paulhayesiv@icloud.com or over the phone at 817-964-2752.
So, coming off talking about increasing our income, but most ranchers may not be able to have an income but when they sell their calves. So how can you make sure that ranchers have a steady cash flow throughout the year, or just in general having a steady cash flow?
Well, that's a good question because, one of the things that we talk about, from a management standpoint, it's better to have a calving season. And calve those cows out during a shorter period of time. Maybe it's, 60 to 120 days, depending on the calving season. And the reason we do that is because we can better manage those cows' nutrition. It's less trips through the chute, meaning less gathering, less cost associated with it. There's a lot of factors that go into calving season. We manage forages better, a lot of different things. On the flip side is your income's coming once a year, Paul. And so, I'll never forget, I had a extension agent. I won't call his name out. He got out of extension years ago, but Baxter, your dad, probably would remember him if I said his name. But he made the comment when I first got to the Overton Research Center. He says, there's a lot of refrigerator herds out here in East Texas. And I said, what do you mean refrigerator herd? And he says, whenever they got to go buy a refrigerator or a washing machine, they sell a calf. It's kind of the cash flow is what you're saying. And he said that jokingly. But I always remember that, Paul, because there is some merit to that. So you have to kind of plan ahead if you're going to have that defined calving season, because that it's, you've got once a year, you're going to be selling that calf crop. So you got to keep that money in reserve or be prepared to borrow the money to take you through the next year. And producers do it both ways on that scenario. So you can have a defined calving season and still do it. Now, some ranchers, they just feel like, whenever I'm ready to sell a calf, I'll just go find the biggest calf and we sell it. All right. Again, that's their strategy. Not sure it's the best strategy, but if it works for them, it works for them. But I think the biggest thing is planning ahead, and you're either going to have to set that money aside or you're going to have to operate on borrowed money until you get the next payday.
Right, and that's absolutely true in terms of having different calving seasons works for different people. I remember we had Mr. Brandon Cleere on as our guest a few last year at some point, and he talked about how he would prefer to have a steady cash flow because he feels like that helps him budget better, whereas some people feel like it's just easier for them to receive all their income at once, and so that just plays out differently for different people.
Yeah, and there's some ranchers that'll have two calving seasons too, and they'll have what we kind of term a fall and a spring, and that spreads the income out. It also spreads the risk out too, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And so if the market turns, you're only selling half your calf crop at that time. So there's pluses and minuses.
Right.
Okay.
So another topic that we kind of want to move into is how a lot of ranchers have different jobs. For instance, I mean, like you said, you have your cattle ranch down in Madisonville, but you have a job with AgriLife Extension, and that's your main job, but you still have to manage your cattle herd. And so, what are some tips that you have for producers that have other occupations, whether it be in agriculture or not in agriculture?
Yeah, good point. Because Baxter, if you look at it, 90% of the ranchers in the state of Texas would have, somewhere around less than 100 cows. Okay. Now, in today's calf market, that could be your sole source of income if you were least cost. But on average, that would not support a family, less than 100 cows. So they're doing other things, whether it's retirement or whether they're, a university professor and beef cattle specialist like Jason Cleere. But I think the thing is that you have to look at, and I heard another term when I was in East Texas from another extension agent, is that Dr. Cleare's a flashlight farmer. Okay. You know what that means, Baxter?
You work through the day and then take a flashlight out at night?
That's
That's
exactly right. We're going to be feeding cows with a flashlight. So, I think you have to, yours is a little bit different, as if you've got another job. So you're going to be timing, maybe for me, I've got to look at my travel schedule too, so I'm trying to, not be maybe calving out during that time, or thinking about setting up cows for embryos and different things like that. So I kind of have to do my timing on those things with that. And then the other thing is thinking about, how we practices that reduce the amount of labor that I have to do. And so, things like that. And we see, again, a lot of producers that use a lot of self-fed supplements. We know they cost more per pound of nutrient. They are the more expensive, but again, there's the convenience factor, because if not, they maybe wouldn't get fed but once a week during the winter supplementation period. So I think you have to look at those kind of things and really look at, balance out convenience factor as well as what it's worth. The other thing too, I think you have to look at too, is that, make sure that, a lot of those producers, I do it because I enjoy it. I do it because I generate some extra income. But, you have to realize that you're not going to get rich off just a handful of cows, but you also, if you enjoy it, that's fine too. I don't play golf. I've got cows. So, those are the factors. And so, the reason I have cows is additional income. I enjoy it. Tax factor from, your property taxes and different things. So, there's a lot of things and reasons why you have it. And it's a juggling act. So.
I love that. I don't play golf. I have cows. I'm gonna have to use that sometimes because I can do putt. That's fun and stuff, but I hate golf. I've never actually played golf, like real golf on a course, but just going and hitting a ball. I've done that before, and that's I don't know. I'm not a golf person, so I'm gonna have to use that sometime. I don't play golf. I have cows.
That's
I
funny.
love it.
I do both.
You look like a golfer, Paul.
I enjoy golf. I think it's fun.
My youngest son enjoys golf too, so I do enjoy going to like Top Golf too.
That's very fun. Yes, sir. Well, on to my next question. There are a lot of ranchers who may not have, who do have agriculture-related jobs. So in their job, they're gonna constantly be learning about ways they can probably do stuff with their ranch because their job's related to agriculture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what about the people who have jobs that aren't in agriculture? So are probably not always learning about ways that they can constantly be educated about their ranch. How can those ranchers be educated about how to operate their ranch?
Yeah, I think, Paul, that, one, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension provides a lot of resources. Okay, we're the land grant university, and the land grant university has three parts: the research component, the teaching. So if you're a college student here at Texas A&M, but then the extension component. So we take the knowledge that's been developed and make it to where it applies to a rancher in Shelby County or Madison County or wherever it may be, and help them to implement that. So we're a valuable resource, whether it be our local extension agents, and those, Baxter. I think your dad was an extension agent way back, wasn't he? Or he was an ag teacher?
No, sir. He was an ag teacher. Yes, sir.
That's right. And so whether it be your local county extension agent as a resource, I work with producers as well as support the county extension programs. The Texas A&M Beef Cattle Short Course is another big event that provides education for those producers. And then we spend a lot of time developing online content for those absentee landowners, those part-time producers that may not have any knowledge in the cattle side, but they're looking for new things. I think where we have to be real careful is in today's time, TikToks and YouTubes, everybody becomes an expert on the other side of the screen. And so, you have to be real careful where you get your resources and whether or not that's the best place to rely on to get that information. Okay, because I can put a whatever cap on and I can be an expert on the other side of the screen. And I can jazz it up and make myself look important enough and sound important enough. I may not know anything. So I think that's the key thing is there's tremendous amount of knowledge. Probably the biggest challenge, Paul, is sorting through the bad to get to the good.
I think that's great, and you make a great point about people claiming to be experts. And I think the great thing about learning from some social media outlets is that you get a wide array of input, and you're able to go and find and fact check that and find, well, if you didn't have it, you might not have known. But then you also have the resources where you can go back and see this is accurate, or that's what he came up with, that's not right. So I think that's a great array of information and still the ability to go and make sure that's right. And you brought up a great point there. So I think this has been a great episode. I'm glad we were able to discuss, continue talking about efficiency, but also talk about ranchers that may have another occupation that they have to take care of, and then also just increasing income as well. So I think this has been a great episode. Paul, anything you wanted to say? All right. Until next time, keep innovating the cattle industry. Signing off. Thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth
and Paul Hayes.
Remember our key verse, Proverbs 16:3.
Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans.
Thank you for listening.